Hello, I'm down here. Well, I'm behind there, but I'm down here now. And thanks for watching. Let's see how we get on. Right then, so it's mark making part B. It's the next step on from what we did last time, drawing into your marks using hatching, cross hatching, curves, waves and contours. And this is what I did last time. Firstly, this one. Now, I did this while I was watching that film. Well, not really watching, sort of half watching, listening. My teacher, the octopus, or the octopus my teacher, or my octopus teacher. Something to do with an octopus anyway. And it was a beautiful film. It was really calm. And I didn't have any particular plans. I just started off in my normal way and it developed. So it's just lines. It's just more and more and more lines. So you can see up here, I've just done wavy lines on top of other wavy lines. Some of the waves are bigger, some of them are smaller. And sometimes I've overlapped a wave going one way with a curve going another way. Sometimes I've done curved lines, which makes something look cylindrical. And then of course, if they're just straight lines, the appearance is flat. And then we've got some spirals, which may have the appearance of being a flat kind of out of perspective cylinder. And then circular lines, which sometimes make closed shapes. I thought this looked a bit like algae. And it just started developing into an underwater world. And down here we've got some diagonal hatching. We've got some cross hatching here. It ends up looking like a net. Then we've got some straight hatching with some curves over it. This ended up looking like seagrass or kelp. So I've just followed the curves, and then I've done a bit of hatching here and there and cross hatching, and then I've got some wobbly kind of circular lines here. So I've just, sometimes I've crossed over the lines and other times I've gone parallel, but I've always stuck to really what the underlying lines were in the beginning, and I've ended up with some mad looking little fish here. So then this was one where I thought, let me just stick to the hatching and the cross hatching a bit more. But I also did thicker parallel lines to the lines that already existed. And to me, this ended up looking like a mad kind of Tibetan, Himalayan stroke Arabic sort of mountainous, crazy, raging river sort of scene, which I rather liked. And then I ended up on my third drawing doing another underwater scene, and I wasn't watching anything actually, but I ended up with a brain coral down here, a Christmas tree worm colony here on top of some other corals. That reminded me of a giant clam shell. Got something a bit like a fish here. I know that's a giant clam. And then these sort of feather duster worms. And then seemed like quite a windy, kind of choppy sea. So in the background then I ended up with turning the original marks into these swaying kind of coconut palms and wind and water whipping everywhere. So how do we do it? Well, what I tend to do is I just start doing parallel lines in with whatever I've already got. Now I know that this was actually an observational drawing that took about a minute, so I feel like drawing into it I'm going to follow that and respect what it was, but I don't need it to look like the plant. So I'm just using a really scabby 0.5 roller tip pen that I found on the floor in my home, but I wouldn't be averse to using a pen that I found on the floor outside if I'd given it a bit of a clean. So I'm just picking out some shapes here that look a bit leafy because I remember that that's what I was drawing. So I could carry on doing this until my back tells me that it's had enough. I remember these were the Monstera leaves. And of course in the middle it was all a bit more dense. There was a lot going on. But I remember that this was a bit of the basket underneath. So I'm going to do some hatching. Now hatching is just doing small lines. Oh, they're a bit high. Diagonal, and then cross hatching. And of course your hatches can be curved, and the closer together they are, the more they build up tone, or the more multi-layered they are. And of course if you curve them, you end up producing something that's got some three-dimensional qualities to it. So I recommend just having a go at practicing at that. But what I'd quite like to do, I can't remember what that basket looked like, but I'm just going to do a bit of hatching, see how it goes. Now when I'm doing this, I'm not moving my hand, I'm just keeping it on the paper and I'm moving my fingers. I don't even need to stay within those lines. I can change direction as much as I like. So you might want to pause me and have a go. So that's hatching. What else did I plan? Hatching, cross hatching, curves, o's and contours. Okay. So I've already done some curves I'm going to do a few more curves. I'm a big fan of a curved line. I'm a big fan of a wavy line as well, actually. So what I mean by contours is that I'm just following these curves, and you end up building into something. Now you could follow the curves exactly and carefully, or you could choose to go over them and in between them and in and out of them. Same over here. So I might choose to follow this one really carefully. And I find that really calming. And you may like to extend them. Just play. I'm just playing around. And I very often end up drawing waves. This kind of flowy line seems to ask me to draw it a lot of the time. I quite like the contrast of that with this. And I like changing pace as well. This hatching's quite rapid. It's got some interesting rhythm to it. But then when I do the curved lines, it all changes. I might go in between, backwards and forwards. I don't know what this is going to end up like. It might not even look like the little basket with the plants in by the time I finish, and that's absolutely fine. As I'm going over here, it's building. But what I will end up with is quite good contrast between these straight little lines and these other flowing organic lines. I might end up with a really wild kind of fantasy plant. Curves, curls, whatever takes my fancy. I can extend it. I can also use a completely different pen. So I've got a brush pen here, and these are really versatile. If you're going to spend a bit of money, These are really good for doing thin lines that get really thick and vice versa. So they're pretty good for doing lots of different kinds of drawing. What I might do is put some darker lines under some of these, because I know they're leaves and I want them to stand out a bit from this basket that I'm doing. So it's quite nice to have a bit of variety. Where else? So all I'm doing is just tracing round. Not even doing it with any particular care. I don't know what this is going to look like when I stop drawing. Notice that I didn't say finished, because I'm not sure if a drawing is ever finished, or, you know, who decides when it's finished. I guess it's finished when you decide that you don't want to do any more on it, or it doesn't need anything else. But some artworks are really beautiful and they look possibly unfinished, and I tend to overdo it actually. Right, now what about if I do a bit of hatching in here with this? Starting to look a little bit like a graphic novel or a manga comic. There are different ways to hold pens and pencils and brushes as well. You know, try holding it right at the end and seeing what different kinds of lines and marks you can make to if you're holding it down here. Shorter, actually. Well, this is me on a Friday night, rock and roll, drawing. I wonder what I'd be doing if I wasn't ill tonight, because we have got a pandemic on after all. Okay, so I would just carry on with this for as long as I wanted to, and I will carry on, and I'll post a photo on Instagram of what I end up with. It's Jojo's Mojo Co on Instagram. Now, let's do, I wanted to show you these. I've been doing journey mapping, so I just take my book with me and a pen if I go in the car or the wheelchair or on my mobility scooter, and I just hold the pen on the paper and let the bumps do the drawing. I've been doing a lot of those. I really like them. That's something completely different. There's a bit more journey mapping. Now, do you remember I told you to put a plastic thing in between the pages? Well, mine fell out and I was too lazy to put it back in again, and I've ended up with this, which is kind of a happy accident really, isn't it? So if that does happen, join those dots up and see what you end up with. And then what happens? Do we carry on joining that dot to that dot? Where can that one go? You end up with something starts looking like a map. This is really relaxing. The important thing is with all of this, it doesn't actually matter what it is. It's not trying to be anything. It's just enjoying making some marks. Look, I'm doing contours again. I can't stop once I start doing them. Okay, so that's something that I could carry on and on and on and on with until all the muscles in my neck and shoulders completely spasm. So I'm going to stop. And show you some drawings that I've been doing in the mornings. So I like to draw first thing in the morning. I wake up, I take some deep breaths, feel my body, think about what I'm grateful for. And then I do 2 pages of writing, stream of consciousness, and then I draw. And I find that my morning drawings are really, really tight. There's another tight one. And here's this morning's tight one. And then I find that if I go and do some yoga, and by yoga I mean just doing some deep, thoughtful, mindful breathing and just moving very, very slowly and gently. I'm not doing headstands or any of that business. It always changes. Always. And I'm pretty sure I did this after doing a chanting meditation, Om Mani Padme Hum. So, though they look like dancing flames, they're actually to do with the shape of a lotus flower. And it's just really interesting for me how differently I feel after doing some breath work and some movement. That's so rigid. That's more flowing. So that's it from me for today. just carry on playing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping in.